Hello, this will be the continuation of reading The Language of Childhood Friends by SeeJayitsWinter. This will be chapter 4, 5, and 6. Chapter 4, A Helping Hand. People think that Katsuki's sports festival was a product of his brash personality, but that's not the full story. Yes, it's part of why the Ash Blonde had stood on a podium to declare that he was gonna win, but that's the end of it. But the bigger reason was that he hated speaking in front of a crowd that he could see in particular. He'd be alright as a hero. He'd seen the hero charts broadcast, and with all those lights on him, it'd be unlikely that the crowd would be visible to him, and interviews wouldn't be in front of masses. But the sports festival was. He could see everyone staring at him. In one aspect, it helped him. He pulled up and stored a crazy amount of sweat just from the 10 seconds he was up there, and it was, quite frankly, nauseating. But it was fine. No one knew, and that was the most important thing right now, or at least no one but the Izuku, which was to be expected as they had grown up together, as they so often had to remind their class. Correction, it was fine, right up until Aizawa said they had to give a solo presentation in front of their whole class. He could manage. It wouldn't be fun, but he knew their class. And Class 1B. Fuck. He could ask for help. The explosive blonde knew he could. Hell, how many times had he reminded Daiki that having help with his dyslexia or ADHD wasn't a bad thing? He and Koda often paired up for presentations, and they made a surprisingly good team, with Koda doing the research and practicing talking on Denki, who memorized the information read to him and did the presentation from memory. So he knew that telling Izawa was an option, and his friends would have no problem pairing with him. Would welcome it, in fact. But he didn't want to. He wanted to get through this, wanted to prove to himself he could. So he would. He chooses the topic of working abroad as pro-heroes, focusing in particular on All Might as his connections to and in America. He spends the 2 weeks before the presentation practicing his lecture over and over, knowing that if it's memorized, then those 10 minutes will go by that much faster. He ropes the Paku squad into practices, citing that he needs his friends to be the best, so he can talk in front of actual faces to prepare themselves. He knows Denki and Mina at the very least work out that he wasn't entirely honest, but luckily they trust him to bring it up himself if it's an issue. And he will, just not today. Midoriya catches him practicing and gives him a knowing look. In hindsight, the nerd definitely knew what he would be doing and had probably barged into his room on purpose so he could offer help without making Katsuki ask for it. Normally, that would piss him off, but with the plan they come up with, he's honestly thankful for once. He'll never admit it. Looking at his friend, he knows he doesn't need to. He already has an idea, and if nothing else, Katsuki can't wait to see Aizawa's face. Neither can Zuko if the gleam in his eyes says anything. Katsuki sticks his hand in his pocket as he enters the hall. He can hide any shaking that way, plus he has sweet absorbent stress balls in each pocket so that he can discard the toxic chemical without needing to burn anything afterwards. He takes his seat, softly looking around. His friends are sat on his row and the one behind him, whilst most of Class 1B and a few stray members of 1A separate them from the Deku squad who are sat at the back, with Izuku sat in the middle between the two very bored-looking students of 1B. Mentally reciting his plan in the 40 minutes before his turn made the time fly. He did pull himself out of his head to listen to Denki and Koda's and Icy Hot's presentation, but ignored Edgar Allan's Crow's and someone else's. The hand girl, maybe, talk. All too quickly it was his turn. Fuck, okay, he could do this, he would. Squirting his shoulders, the teen made his way up to the podium. Flashcards were spread out in front of him so that it minimized any natural glisten contact, and he looked straight for the middle of the assembled students, slightly lower than usual, and started to talk. Whenever he looked about to stumble or had glanced down a couple of times, Izuku would sing his next part. Apart from Aizawa, who knew they had a sign language, it would be impossible to tell what the green-haired student was doing, and so would be overlooked as him practicing his own speech. And it was working. As he got into the content, he found it easier to focus on Izuku's hands rather than the eyes looking at him. At Izuku's smirk halfway through his talk, he realized that Aizawa had realized something was happening, and caught the exact moment the Raven had seen his helper's hands' fast movements. Scowling slightly, whether at the two breaking, or bending the rules again, the fact that they were seemingly working together, honestly, he thought people wanted them to get along, or whatever it was that he had no way of deciphering the race of communication, Katsuki didn't know or care. The red-eyed child smirked himself and felt himself fall into his work, speeding through his content and being taken by surprise when his remaining 5 minutes seemed to rush by, but happy to take his seat again at the polite applause from everyone and rather rambunctious clapping from his friends. Of course, 20 minutes later, Katsuki repaid the favor. He wasn't in anyone's debt, but also he found himself wanting to help. He told himself it was to see Aizawa lose it at them so blatantly, bending the rules and being unable to call them on it. Izuku, as everyone knew, had the tendency to mumble. Kachan was there to help him keep him on track. The blonde couldn't sign so close to the front, but as he was front row, he very, very gently tapped his pen against the table. It was more the movement than the sound that Izuku was watching for, to feed the other his lines, to stop him from going on a tangent. Red eyes slid sideways to watch as their homework teacher got more exasperated, annoyed, and surprisingly awed, which confident boost right there. Really, you two. As everyone else filed out, Aizawa stopped Bakugo and Midoriya with a pointed sentence and a roll of dry eyes. I want to say I can't believe you two would use whatever that is, so obviously, but as it's you two doing it, I'm unfortunately not. Aizawa crossed his arms. As impressed as he was, the two really weren't meant to help each other for this kind of assignment, unless they had permission. However, you did break the rules by... Prove it! Midoriya. Yeah, go on, prove it. Prove we, two teenagers, are using a secret, made-up language. At Bakugo's smirk and Midoriya's laugh, Shota glared at the two annoyingly. It had no effect, which was concerning, and slightly... nope, it was very concerning. He sighed heavily, rubbed the bridge of his nose, as if he could force the headache these two gave him away by pure force of will, and when that didn't work, decided it wasn't his problem, that he needed more caffeine, jelly, pouches, and to cuddle, either a cat or B, his husband. Not in that order, and all within the next 15 minutes, if he wanted to be at least semi-sane at the end of the day. Just leave, you two, and don't break anything. That includes bones, Midoriya. Your own or otherwise. Bakugo lost it at that, laughing at the green-eyed teen, messing his curse up despite Midoriya battling at his hands and whining before they separated as they left the hall. Thanks, Zuko. No problem, Kachan. Let's fuck with him a little bit more, yeah? Oh, hell yeah. Chapter 5. We can rely on each other. And make a pretty mean curry. Midoriya and Bakugo had spent the past 2 weeks using the language as much as they could. Now that they were aware that Aizawa knew and couldn't stop them, it had opened the gates of opportunity. Needed to talk about the project? They clicked it out in Morse code. One of them didn't know an answer when picked on, the other tapped it on the table. Hell, they even signed a couple of sentences at each other when Aizawa was looking, just to see if they could get a rise out of their teacher. They hadn't visibly gotten a reaction. Yet, they would. When they put their minds to something, they could be very persistent. But the next few weeks once again proved that having a secret language was really beneficial in everyday life. If there's one thing Katsuki's not going to admit, it will be being absolutely terrified of spiders. And not just the big spiders, all the spiders. Growing up, Izuku could never be afraid of them, as he was the one to move them if their parents weren't around. So when Katsuki sees movement on the common room walls that belonged to one of the 8-legged bastards, he's absolutely glad that A, he didn't scream, it was a close thing, he's not going to lie, and B, he has a way to tell Izuku, who's on the other side of the common room, about the spider without drawing attention to himself. The One for All user was enjoying spending time with the whole class. The dorms truly were wonderful in getting everyone to loosen up a bit and get to know each other on a deeper level. A critical thing if they were to one day be on the field together. The teen had been listening to Kaminari and Todoroki talk about whether feeling free shad vok ado was better than feeling Adam, or not, when he heard Kachan knock his foot against the table 3 times to get his attention, before tap talking. Green curls tilted slightly to show he was listening, whilst he moved one of his legs to the side, slightly, allowing him to reply when he needed. Spider? Zuki, spider by the TV. Spider. I see it. Don't worry, Kachan. Now that he looked properly, he could see that the blonde was one tense line, and despite appearances, definitely wasn't listening to Tokoyami and Kirishima talk about their favorite bands, as red eyes stared and moving at the spiders. Huh. I'll be right back, guys. Izuku stood up. Feeling Kachan's gaze jump from him to the small spider as he made his way over, unfortunately getting Mina's attention, who noticed the spiders as he reached it. Oh my god, is that a spider? Someone get it, get it! Oh, Miro, you're a lifesaver! Whilst Mina panicked and climbed over Kaminari to use the electric boy as a human shield, Izuku had calmly picked up the perpetrator and, going the long way to Avon Kachan, placed the spider outside. The ash blonde visibly relaxing as the door swung shut, along with Mina, who apologized to Denki and Shoto for interrupting. Thank you. No problem, Kachan. Kachan. Wadzuki. There's a thing. Oh, for fuck's sake. Aizawa glared at his problem children, who were once again tapping away to each other. The raven-haired teacher was fairly sure that they weren't arguing, although Midoriya wasn't doing any work and was instead staring at the open window. Bakugo stuck his hand up, not waiting to be called on before speaking. There's a wasp in the classroom. Without waiting for a reply, Katsuki ripped a page out of his notebook and strode over to the open window and started to guide the wasp to walk out to the outside. It buzzed slightly as if to take off. Midoriya tensed, but the explosive teen just placed the paper on its back to stop it before crowding it out of the classroom and shutting the window with a firm bang. Thank you, Kachan. No worries, Zoo. Kachan, can you feel this? Hey, Kachan, can you click back for me? What? Hey, it's okay, you're in a room and it's 9 p.m. Happened. I'm not sure, you were downstairs and then you came up and then I heard you stumble from my room. Neck. Huh? Touched my neck. And oh, that made sense. If anything was going to set the other teen off, it was his neck. Between the sludge villain, the sports festival, and the summer camp, and the restraints the villains used, Katsuki didn't allow anything near his neck unless he was completely aware of it. Whilst it wasn't anything he told anyone explicitly, Izuku was sure that most of the Baku squad knew, at least, as they were always so careful even with wrestling and group hugs. The two sat in the middle of Katsuki's room, Izuku tapping against his friend's arm to help ground him without making things too loud, whilst Katsuki clicked back answers or just talked in general to help clear his mind until the teen was himself again. Midoriya stood and stretched out, turning slightly towards the door. Stay. Sure. Like they used to do as kids, the two curled up next to each other, ignoring the word for once. Inku and Izuku were at the Bakugo residence along with a few members of Mitsuki and Masaru's immediate family for another monthly family dinner. The two teens were serving drinks for the adults, whilst Katsuki's younger cousins plated finger foods up to take rounds. 2 teas and a coffee. Bakugo clicked out in the kitchen after talking to one of his aunts. He listened to hear Izuku's reply before moving on to his grandparents. Need anything from the fridge before I take these out? Just the milk. Here. Thanks. Save me a seat. Izuku clicked a yes before taking his tray out to the living room, snagging Mitsuiki and Katsuki's favorite spot. The midday sun hit just right, and honestly, both the Midoriyas seriously considered the Bakugo's part cut with how much they all liked the warmth, and stretched his legs out slightly to keep the space next to him empty for Kachan. It was Midoriya's turn to cook, and with the bribe of getting extra of Inko's curry, had roped Bakugo into lending a helping hand. He had thought making something that was normally very spicy through by having one bowl for him and Kachan, as well as those who could deal with the full recipe, like Kaminari, Tokoyami, and Todoroki, who all had quirks that could make hot food more bearable, and another bowl for the rest of the class that was considerably milder. You do ours, and I'll make the rest. Got it. To the confusion of the rest of 1A, Katsuki and Izuku commanded the kitchen in perfect harmony. passing ingredients over and moving out of the way of the others seemingly before the first had started moving. In reality, like in most professional kitchens, they will simply broadcasting their locations out to stop any accidents, like Izuku nearly stabbing Katsuki with a knife because he forgot to mention that he was moving forward. Left, behind, right with a knife. Pass that when you're done. And on one memorable occasion, cut. Zuko, that is a knife. You caught it? Not the fucking point. They had served up in sync, taking a seat by their respective friends. I can actually taste the spice in this. I'm impressed. Tokoyami was staring at his bowl in awe. Having a bird quirk meant that spice didn't really affect him the way it did everyone else. You guys have a different recipe? Momo was looking down at her own bowl, now realizing that her own was hardly hot enough for it to make it past Tokoyami's bird genetics. Yeah, you extras couldn't deal with the full recipe. And you can? Actually, yes, I can, pink cheeks. I was brought up on this like the nerd. And Icy Hot and Pika Pika over there have quirks that allow them to have high levels of spice, so they can deal. You can't. Kaminari? Huh? Oh, I just numb my electricity to numb my nerves. I can taste the flavor, but I can't feel the pain or burn that you guys would. Oh, can I try? Apparently, Uraraka wanted a death today. I don't think that's a good idea, Uraraka. It could be a bit much. Fuck that, let her try. Kachan, no. Kachan, yes. Smirking at his green-haired friend, Bakugo pushed his ball towards the anti-gravity team. Oh, Bakugo's sharing food. Things are getting serious. Mina leaned forward, using Hanta's shoulder to balance as she tried to get a closer look at Blasty's food, as if it might look different. As the brunette took a bite, immediately regretted and ran for the milk carton, Izuku just sighed and finished his mouthful. Well, might as well go all in. There's some spare of mine in Kachan's spice level if you guys want to try it. When Aizawa walked into the dorms to check on his kids' students, he didn't expect all of them but the problem children, Tokoyami, Todoroki, and Kaminari to be crying and drinking milk. What the fuck? An exasperate gaze fell on the five unaffected. Problem children, I assume this is somehow your fault. Of course not, sir. Midoriya reached behind him to grab the half-empty spare curry bowl. Do you want some curry? We have some spare. Chapter 6. Prove it. Their language ends up being more of use than just talking lessons when they already know the content. It's well known that the two of them are massive nerds, even if Katsuki doesn't seem it at first, and study ahead of the lessons when they are given a brief for one of their hero training practical lessons. It's right as the bell is about to go to signal the end of the day when Aizawa enters Magnet classrooms to give them a briefing for the next morning. Tomorrow you are to go straight to ground beta, as the whole morning will be a practical lesson on taking strategies in front of an enemy. It will be done in pairs, which have already been selected. Aizawa caught of the excited whispers trying to get their friends to pair with them before they even properly began. Your class and 1B will be taking part. Although you will be working with a classmate, the idea is to learn from the other students. Whilst you have undoubtedly had experiences, they haven't. They have had lessons you haven't, as a result. Your real-life experiences are invaluable, but that doesn't mean that you haven't missed anything because of them. Isaiah moved towards the board and picked up a piece of chalk so that he could illustrate their future tasks. Whilst he spoke, students like Mina and Denki with ADHD did better with more than one source of information. You will have an earpiece connected to your partner as well as a pair from 1B. 1B will go first as the heroes, and then you will have a turn. When you are the villains, the aim is to separate. One of you will be led to a dead end eventually, but you will get points for how long you last. Then, when one is apprehended, it is up to your partner to get information, free you, and stop the heroes. When it's your turn, you will choose one of your opponents to capture and tank to your base. In front of them, in the hearing range of the earpiece, you will discuss your plan. It is up to you to then carry out the plan to keep the first and capture the second villain without being sabotaged. The only rules for discussing your plan is that you cannot remove any earpiece that you, your partner, and your 1B opposition must hear your entire conversation. No severe injuries to your opposition or yourself. Aizawa spared Midoriya a glare before noticing that Bakugo had also given the green teen a pointed stare. The day before, Aizawa was getting pissed off. In all honesty, he rarely got truly angry. His job meant that it was a nightly occurrence for him to see and hear a lot of really awful things that required him to keep a logical head if he wanted to stick to his, admittedly wonky, morals. But Black King was testing him. If he had to listen to the other teacher talk about how 1B would be better than 1A, as if his kids his students, that's better, hadn't lived through extremely traumatic experiences, he would not be liable for responsibility of his actions. Temporary insanity was a plea for a reason Black King was looking to provoke. Let's put it to the test. Aizawa snapped. Understandably, but still. The raven-haired teacher felt the eyes of the staff room fall on him, but it was too late to stop now. We normally teach the third years how to talk freely about plants without being followed. Neither classes have had any kind of lessons or experiences in this. If 1B is truly naturally better, then this should show it. His eyes locked onto Vlad's as he watched the man shift in his chair, clearly not expecting Aizawa to throw down the gauntlet. Well, I guess. Come on, King, you always said that your class doesn't get spoiled, so this is your chance, man. Honestly, God bless Aizawa's loud blonde. Of course, let's get this plant out then. Yeah, let's. Aizawa hid his smile in the scarf. This would be fun. 1A as the villains was relatively uneventful. 1B was admittedly very good and proved their worth as heroes. But Class 1A was, simply put, better at adapting. How many times had they been put into shit situations to have to work on the fly, wing every plan just to escape? In this scenario, they had their opponent's plan. Already, they were way better off than at the USJ and the summer camp, and knew how each and every one of their classmates acted in a crisis, so they didn't necessarily need to plan out their escapes so much as work how their partner would work in this scenario. 1B was good, but 1A weren't worried about being better. The first 1A hero partners to figure out the purposeful loophole was Todoroki and Kaminari. They were right in the middle of 1A's turn at being heroes, and after watching the matches before them, Kaminari had a light bulb moment. They captured their opponent, a girl Kaminari vaguely recognized as the one he'd lost to at the festival, when he suddenly interrupted Todoroki trying and explained a plan vague enough for the listeners to understand, but for Denki to get what he was talking about. Hello and welcome to Chili's. It was their standard greeting at this point. That, or they just T-posed at each other in the common room, either work. Dude, we could just talk in another language. It's not against the rules. As Shoto translated the English in his head, he got hit with the same light bulb moment as his friend. They completed the rest of their plan with an honestly terrifying efficiency, considering they talked only in Vine quotes, memes, English, Russian, and French, to the confusion of their captive and her partner, who was easily caught when he was found staring in confusion at a wall, wondering, rightfully so, what the actual fuck just happened. To those not in Class 1A, it was fairly easy to see Todoroki as quiet, stoic boy, and whilst that was true, most of 1A had seen him and Denki have full conversations in Vines and knew that the two both owned 6-foot-long worms on strings. Basically, the two of them were the only ones who got close to the pure chaotic vibes that Midoriya and Bakugo radiated. It was Kaminari's light bulb moment that got Katsuki and Izuku to realize they had the biggest advantage ever. Although, after sharing a look with Aizawa, they had the sneaky suspicion that being paired together was perhaps not as coincidental as everyone else thought. Showing a smirk, they knew this would be good. It wasn't. It was fucking amazing. Midoriya and Bakugo of their opposition of Monoma and Kendo were last. By standard agreement, Izuku and Katsuki had decided that speaking was not going to happen at any point, let alone when they were discussing their plans. Talking was out. Clicking was in. Copy is the bigger threat. Right, let's get him then, Kachan. I will watch as he realizes he has no chance. You got it, Zoo. Monoma cursed mentally when he realized he was being chased to the dead end. He had got Midoriya down on his turn to be the hero. He cursed verbally when the capture tape went around his wrist without any contact from either teams. Part of his and Ken's plan relied on him having one of their quirks, but it seemed like they were being very careful in the distance they kept from him, all the way from the dead end to the hero base. Never mind. 1B was so much better and what the fuck? You can't do that! Shut it, you copycat extra. You have to discuss your plans. This is against the rules. 1A is no better if they only went for cheating, you know? I know your secret now. Oh, shut it. The copy quirk owner made an affronted noise at being told to shut up by the 1A cinnamon roll. It's Morse code, you motherfucker. Izuku sighed and turned back to his partner. We need to get hands on that blue building we passed. She was last seen at the red one. That's not bad. Exactly. Once we get her there, if we get her inside, her quirk is less useful as she limits her field of vision. If we get her hands to expand, it will be easier to tape on her. That's true. So whether she's inside or not, we need her to activate her quirk. If you use yours, she could activate hers to protect herself from the explosion, giving me the opening to tape her up. As they walked out of the base, they heard confused talking come from their ears, and shared a smirk before setting their plan into motion. This was meant to be equal. Neither classes have had that kind of lesson. We both agreed that this was fair. Then what was that? Be more specific, King. Aizawa stared his coworker in the eyes, whilst the other fumed. That they cheated. That was Morse code. It was not. It sounded like Morse code. It was coded. At Aizawa's half of amusement, Vladkik narrowed his eyes. You knew. That's why you were so quick to give this practice as test. Aizawa, done with the other man's shit, had already started to walk away, but stopped to turn his head in the other man's direction. Prove it. Back in the common room, Class 1A was trying to wrap their heads around the video of Midoriya and Bakugo, A, working seamlessly together, and B, having their own fucking language. What the fuck? It was a testament to the confusion when Ida didn't lecture Kirishima on his language. You guys know Morse code that well? That was in Morse code. Shoto was staring at the two with his head tilted like a puppy, focusing on a tennis ball from where he was squished onto an armchair with Denki. I know bits of Morse code, hero and civilian, and that wasn't it, was it? I mean, it kinda is. Izuku tilted his head slightly as he thought how to explain, without giving it away. It was their language after all. Whining slightly went to Wane's amusement and horror. Kachan ruffled his curls with a huff. It's a mix of all Japanese Morse codes, and then it's coded itself on top of that in a way only we know. That's all your extras are getting, so leave it. That just set him off even more. Denki's hands failing around as he talked until Shoto stuck his foot into the other's ribs when he was nearly hit with a stray arm. The two childhood friends shared a smile at the chaos they had caused, reveling the fact that they were in the center of all the confusion. Midoriya and Bakugo, I have to ask, were you two talking throughout all those lessons you were tapping in? Because I must say that is very unhero-like behavior, and I thought you two at least were taking our education seriously. Izuku looked at Kachan before leaning slightly forward, catching Wane's attention once again, causing a lull in conversation as everyone waited for his answer. Prove it! Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I forgot to mention at the beginning, but if you haven't already noticed, in places where you can really catch it that they were tapping away, clicking, using their language, I tapped away myself, so it could be obvious. In other places where it was specifically said that they were clicking for the whole time or they were signing, whatever they were doing, I didn't. But when you couldn't tell, I did do this sound. So I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your reactions, and well, hope you have a good New Year's Eve.